My name is Hector Perez. I'm CEO and founder of Quantum FBI, and I'll be your host and moderator for the next hour. In this session, we will focus on how organizations move from experimenting with AI tools and driving measurable results. Better decisions, faster workflows, improved controls, and real adoption across teams. We have a lot to get to around this very hot topic. Today, we'll spend most of our time in a moderated conversation with two panelists. Along the way, we'll have a few polling questions. Let's run through today's agenda. First, we'll talk about strategy and where AI actually works. We'll discuss board, executive, and investor expectations, culture adoption, and the human side of AI, governance, risks, and reality checks. We'll talk a little bit about lessons learned throughout the work that we've done to date. And then we'll talk about looking forward, what to expect around AI, and then we'll open it up to the Q&A session. I'm excited to welcome two leaders who approach AI transformation from complementary angles. On the screen, you will see information about their backgrounds. As for me, as noted, my name is Hector Perez. And first, I'm happy to introduce my colleague, Jolene Bredenkamp, VP of Finance at Quantum FBI. Jolene will bring the finance lens, meaning how finance teams are thinking about value creation, productivity, governance, controls, and risk, and what it takes to move from experimentation to consistent and repeatable outcomes. Secondly, we have Monica Marquez, co-founder of FlipWork AI. Monica will share a broader enterprise perspective, meaning how organizations build momentum, align stakeholders, and scale adoption across functions so AI becomes more than just a set of tools and instead becomes a capability that changes how teams work. In today's session, we will talk about what's working, what's not, and what leaders can do right now to guide teams to real results. A couple of words about Quantum FBI. Quantum FBI is a strategic finance and business intelligence advisory firm. We help growth companies maximize the power of their finance functions through data, people, process, and technology. This year marks our 10-year anniversary, and we've been a strategic partner to organizations, not just in the finance function, but across the business. And now Monica will share a few words about FlipWork AI.
Hi, everyone. I'm Monica Marquez, co-founder of FlipWork. And just by way of background, I spent a large chunk of my career at teams, leading teams at Google and Goldman and several other blue chip organizations. And if I'm honest, I spent most of that time perfecting that industrial version of work where we believed that more effort and more grind always equaled more success. But in this new post-AI age, we've reached a point where that model is officially broken. So we're facing what we call this exponential divide, where technology, the AI is moving at warp speed, but our human operating system, our habits, and how we define our value is stuck in the past. And so we're essentially using these 2026 tools to power our 1996 mindset. So that's why we built FlipWork. At FlipWork, we help leaders move their teams from effort to impact. We don't just install AI. We use our science-backed assessment, the Flip Factor, to find where your people are actually stuck and where the robot friction is really hiding. And from there, we go to the Flip Lab to help people break through this identity bottleneck, shifting from being the doers of these manual tasks that drain all the energy to the orchestrators of value leveraging AI. So ultimately, we're here to help take the robot out of the human so your best people can finally work or do the work that you actually hired them to do. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have here today with Jolene and Hector.
Great, Monica. And with that, I will just say, please visit our chat box to schedule an assessment with Quantum FBI or FlipWork. Let's get started. Okay, so Monica and Jolene, AI is everywhere right now. You can't go anywhere without hearing about AI. So many AI investments, but impact isn't everywhere. From your vantage point, what is the biggest disconnect you're seeing between AI investment and real business outcomes? I'll start with you, Jolene.
Sure. The biggest disconnect I see is that AI is being treated like a technology purchase instead of a business redesign. So most leaders agree that AI is important, so they invest in the tools, the pilots, and the training, but they don't translate that into clear decisions about where AI fits in the operating model. And that's where the paralysis comes from. So teams get stuck in three places. Firstly, the next step is unclear. So the mandate is use AI, but there's no prioritization of which workflows matter most or what good looks like. So activity goes up. We do a lot of experiments, prompting, prototypes, but the outcomes don't. Secondly, there's no measurement at the workflow level. So ROI is discussed in theory, but not instrumented in practice. So if you can't point to a baseline and a few metrics like cycle time or cost per transaction, then AI is going to stay inspirational instead of operational. And lastly, there is no ownership and change management. So AI touches process, policy, people's roles, and without a clear process owner, the decision, as well as decision rights and a plan for how work actually changes, pilots stay in a sandbox and they never scale. So the gap isn't belief, it's translation. And the companies seeing real outcomes aren't doing more AI. They're just making a small number of high confidence workflow bets, embedding AI into the work people already do and hold it accountable to the same metrics they run the business on. So that's what turns the excitement into results and also what breaks the paralysis.
Great perspective there, Jolene. And I read, Monica, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, my thoughts on this are that the human was the afterthought, right? We're treating a human evolution problem like a software procurement problem. We see companies spending billions in investing in AI, but that productivity is flat. You're seeing the headlines everywhere that, only there's no ROI, very like single digit percentages of companies that are actually seeing the ROI. And that's what at FlipWork we call the exponential divide, right? We have all of these state-of-the-art, world-class systems and technology, but our humans are operating these tools, but they're still kind of measuring themselves with these old school metrics, right? Of effort equals success. And that disconnect is what we call the effort trap. We say we want innovation, but our corporate systems still crave the grind, right? First in, last out, like just doing all the hard work. And when a team uses AI to finish a week's work, worth of work in an hour, then we have this identity crisis, and managers, the first instinct is to give more manual work to fill the time. And that's where the ROI dies instantly, right? We need to kind of take all of those benefits and the times gained and focus on high value work. And so they start to create this work slop, meaningless high volume output that they're doing because we haven't shifted our identity from labor in the loop to judgment in the loop. And so until we really shift our mindset and we start to value outcomes over the hours or impact over effort, the investment is never going to show up and you're not going to see it in the bottom line.
Really great points. And it's interesting because we've been hearing about AI 10 years, right? We've
Yes.
been hearing about AI, folks saying we're going to do it. And now they went from not really understanding what that meant to now almost everyone's saying we're implementing AI. But
Yes.
what does that really mean in practice? And what does it often miss?
Well, when leaders say we're implementing AI, they usually mean that they've bought 1,000 licenses, right? But what they're missing is that they're asking employees to participate in what feels to them like their own replacement, right? Like if I train this AI, I'm just going to train myself out of a job. And in my experience leading large teams, the hurdle isn't the data, it's this identity bottleneck, right? Because as we mentioned, for decades, for 10, 20, 30 years, we've told our best people that their value lies in doing the work, right? The manual analysis, the grind. And if we don't intentionally redesign or reinvent the role and teach them that they have to be an orchestrator, they'll see AI as a threat to their ego and to their paycheck, and they'll start to really wonder, like have this identity crisis of like, well, what am I supposed to be doing? And so the most dangerous assumption that executives make is that AI is just a faster way of doing things, right? It is not. If your goal is just 10% efficiency gain, you're thinking too small and you're never going to see the ROI. And so that's why at FlipWork, we see leaders who assume we sometimes go in and we work with them and they assume that their teams are lazy, that they're not adopting the AI, they don't want to use these tools. But in reality, their team is just stuck in what we call the effort trap, right? Because we have conditioned ourselves to believe that effort equals success, and it's what we've been paid for and recognized for. And so they assume that if they use AI to become 10 times faster, then the company's just going to give them 10 times more of the workload, and they're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over. And so the real goal isn't this efficiency plug-in, like I'm going to plug in the AI and people are going to get their work done faster. What we really want people to do is have this, what we call cognitive liberty, like releasing people and upgrading them as humans, letting them be able to use their zone of genius, the judgment, the discernment in a very different way than they're used to, right? You first shouldn't be asking how much time can we save, but really, how can we take that time and do more high value work that we've been ignoring for years and we just haven't had time to get to because we've been grinding so much doing all of the robotic stuff, right? That liberation is where the real growth is hitting, is hiding, where you move from being this builder or this doer to actually architecting the value, taking the time gained that AI, can do all of this stuff for you, taking those extra hours and applying the discernment, the judgment, your authentic intelligence to the artificial intelligence.
I knew we brought the right people to be on this panel. We're going to get different perspectives here, and I think this is very timely, and this is what our participants came to hear. You say it's not about data, it's about human. We're going to show both of those sides because
Yes.
in some cases it is about data, in some cases it's about human, in some cases it's about both. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So I'm really excited to be talking about this here. I'm going to stick with you, Monica, for just a second, because for executives just starting, or in some cases restarting their AI journey, what is the first wrong assumption they tend to make? And you talked about it a little bit in the section before, but just elaborate on that a little bit, because I think more than we recognize, there's some folks who are just getting out of the gate. And I think
Yes.
it's really worth discussing. What is the first wrong assumption they tend to make?
The first wrong assumption is that they have to identify or pick the right tools. Like what tool, what AI are we going to invest in? And they really don't understand is like, what are they trying to solve for? And so really the first thing they should be thinking about is like, what is it that we want to get out of these AI tools, these LLMs? Because just going and buying blanket licenses for ChatGPT or Claude, it may work for some business units in your organization, but not for all, because we all know that each one of these LLMs has its strength and has its weakness. So you have to really start doing, this homework of asking your people, what is it that they need and what tools are actually going to fit for them. So when you're starting your AI journey, sometimes it's just very overwhelming and they don't know where to start. But where you start asking what you need to start asking yourself is, what do you hope to gain? What do you want the AI to, help you do better? Or what are the outcomes? And then you reverse engineer it and decide which tools are the ones that you need to buy, right? Because it's not one size fits all. And that's the overwhelming thing, that leaders make this big assumption that I'm just going to go buy the most popular license and that's going to work for everybody and it's going to be plug and play. And it doesn't really work that way. You've got to kind of pause and really understand, what are you solving for? And then help people understand what tools are going to help them do that.
Great, Monica. Thanks. And I think this is the right time to have our first poll question. So I'm gonna launch that poll now. I'll give everyone a few seconds to answer the question. The poll is, which statement best describes how AI is currently being used inside your organization? Okay, a few more seconds. All right, great. I'll end the poll and share the results. It looks like most folks believe that individual employees using AI tools independently, and that's pretty telling, right? What that says is they're not waiting for the organization. They are going to go out there and they know that AI is out there, and if the organization is not helping them get ahead in terms of their AI journey, they're going to take matters into their hands. That's good and that's bad, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. I'd like to move on. Before that, I'd like to also say that at Quantum, we provide finance transformation services to our clients, which includes process redesign, system selection, integration, and AI readiness. And I think that's the reason we're seeing so much of an uptick in AI readiness is because, again, folks are trying to understand where they are, and they're looking for folks to come and help them understand that. So please see the link again in the chat and schedule a call with Quantum or FlipWork, whatever works for you. Let's keep going. Jolene, this next one is for you. Where do you see AI delivering the fastest and most measurable wins today, especially within finance and operations?
So what we see, the fastest wins is really in high volume, repeatable work where the data already exists. So especially across AP and AR, monthly close, FP&A, procurement and service operations. And again, the winners aren't big moonshots. It's really teams using AI to remove friction, as we mentioned before. It's fewer touches, faster cycle times, higher accuracy, and better compliance. And the quickest wins really shows up, or the result of that is days shaved off of the month-end close, your cost per invoice reduced, DSO reduced, or forecast error improved.
I think that's right. I think we talk about this in terms of where's the low-hanging fruit and where are the places where we can get our head, focus around a particular process and see what we can do to move that process forward. That does a number of things. What we see is that helps companies gain confidence in AI and their ability to move the needle around a particular workflow. And what we see there is when they start to do that, momentum starts to build, adoption starts to grow, people start to embrace it, feel more comfortable, and that now helps people on the ground move the ball forward and helps the company get on their journey. So it's almost about trusting your people, but getting them to focus instead of making it so broad that they have, as we say, analysis paralysis, because they don't know where to start and how they're going to get the outcomes that they're looking for. You just kind of have to start and find something and look to measure what results you get out of that. Monica, for you, how should leaders decide where AI belongs versus where it doesn't? And what's the filtering question that you recommend these leaders go through?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question we get a lot, where leaders, don't know where to start or where to start digging, right? Or where to start applying the AI. And many times they come to us and they want this like magic bullet or this complex framework that's just going to help them, if they go through the motions, they're going to figure it out. But I prefer what I like to say the MacGyver approach, right? Just a simple filter. But before you can actually even apply a filter, you have to know what you're looking at. And so at FlipWork, we start with our proprietary AI diagnostic assessment that we call the Flip Factor. And this isn't a survey, it's a science-backed diagnostic rooted in organizational psychology and change management. And we use it to get a real lay of the land of your people, measuring exactly how AI ready your team or your organization is at its core, right? And what's most revealing is the gap analysis that we do between leaders and their teams. And often what we see is leaders think the team is resisting tools. Well, the reality is that the teams feel like they have the tools, but they don't have the permission to change the process, right? To reinvent the process. And this perception delta is where transformation is usually dies, right? It doesn't happen. And so Flip Factor, it allows us to take this guesswork out of the equation, meeting every individual exactly where they are to create this personalized path so they can start reinventing themselves in their role and using the AI correctly. And then once we have all of those insights, we move to this guided workshop where we start to apply that simple filter I was talking about, friction versus judgment filter, right? And what I mean by that is we start asking people to break down their workflows or their processes and asking them if the task is high friction, meaning it's repetitive, it's this rote thing where they feel like a robot, or a machine, that's exactly where the AI belongs, right? Where they get drained. So think data reconciliation, initial drafting of documents, or even pattern sorting or identifying patterns. These are the tasks that drain the cognitive energy of your people, and that should be really moved over to the AI so that your people can focus on the higher level work where they use their brain and their discernment, right? And so that's where if the task requires this unique taste, moral courage, or this high stakes empathy, AI has no business being there because AI can generate a report, but it doesn't have skin in the game, right? It doesn't care if the client leaves, it doesn't care if the client gets upset, or it doesn't understand the vibe of a boardroom full of decision makers, and it can't really discern that because it doesn't have the judgment that we do, that intuition. So we use this science, the science from the Flip Factor to find that friction, and then we use the AI to take the robot out of the human so that your people can spend 100% of their time on the higher value things that actually, will bring the ROI. And what we like to say is that, humans have a soul, the AI doesn't, right? So it's really simple. If it's about volume, give it to the AI. If it's about context and wisdom and the kind of learned experience, keep it for the human. That's the filter that we use.
Great. So broader enterprise strategy thoughts on how you should go about and thinking about where it should be. Let's drill this down a little bit, Jolene, because we focus on the finance function. So,
Yes.
Jolene, talk to me about, is it better to start with a specific use case, the close, forecasting, APAR, or a broader workflow design? And I really want you to drill down on that because I think this is what's going to really make a bit of a difference. It's going to bring some context into it for the folks on the webinar today.
Agreed, Hector. So I'm firmly in the camp of starting with a specific use case. So one workflow, and here's why. In finance, AI only becomes real when it's embedded into work and not discussed as a strategy. The CFOs I see making progress didn't begin with a long AI roadmap or a board deck about transformation. They started with one painful, repetitive task that everyone wanted gone. And it's something high volume, rules-based, easy to measure. Think invoice exceptions in AP, or as Monica mentioned, reconciliations, collections prioritization in AR, or even drafting variance commentary. So that approach does three things very quickly. It creates a clear baseline and ROI. It builds trust, and it improves the data and process muscle you need for bigger moves later. So you can think of it as a crawl, walk, run progression where you start with triage. So you understand and prioritize what needs attention first. Then you focus on one workflow at a time, after which you can move toward full automation. And bit by bit, as the data gets better, confidence will grow. So that's really how AI will scale in finance, and honestly, how it scales everywhere. It's not top down and not all at once, but one workflow at a time. And once the first one works, you replicate the pattern to the next workflow, and momentum does the rest.
All right, so that's helpful, right? Because it gets us to think about one workflow but we've seen cases where a workflow was identified. Yes, there's a lot of pain. Yes, there's volume. Yes, there's the repetitive nature. But I want this for both you and Monica and Jolene. I'm going to ask you to keep going on the point that you just had.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me an example of a workflow that looked perfect for AI, but failed because the foundation wasn't there?
So a good example is automating AP touchless invoice processing from end to end. So, from capturing to matching to coding, approving, and eventually payment. So on paper, it looks like the perfect AI win. It's high volume, it's repetitive, it's measurable. So where this example failed wasn't really the model, it's the foundation. So the issues were, firstly, vendor master data was messy. So there's duplicate vendors, inconsistent naming, outdated payment terms. Secondly, POs and receipts weren't reliable. So there's missing POs, late receiving, partial receipts, inconsistent item descriptions. Thirdly, coding rules weren't standardized, so there's different approvers coding the same spend differently, no clear policy for specific items, multi-entity allocations, and then also approval paths were unclear. So the exceptions are routed based on tribal knowledge, people bypassing the system to get it done. And that's really where AI confidently automated the wrong things. So it mismatched invoices, suggested inconsistent GL coding, and flooded the team with exceptions. So the results were more rework, slower cycle times, and a control and compliance headache. So really the exact opposite of what we wanted to achieve of this in this business case. So AI doesn't fix broken processes, it really scales it. So the teams that recover do that in stages. They first clean up the vendor PO receipt discipline, define the coding and approval rules, and then use AI for exception detection and routing and summaries for approvals. And only after that, push that toward touchless automation. So the basics need to be correct first.
And that's what I was alluding to earlier, right?
Yeah.
Because AI is going to work off of the data. It's going to look for those patterns. And if you don't have those patterns or there's inconsistency, the AI is subject to the information that it's going to get. Here comes the intelligence, but it's kind of muddying the waters there. And that's why both these perspectives are important. But I'll ask you, Monica, if you would elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what Jolene was saying, that if you layer the AI on a broken process, you're just going to compound and really exponentially increase that broken process. And so, we've worked with many organizations in our Flip Labs where we bring them in and they take the workflow and break it down. And I have a perfect example and one that resonated with me because I used to head up recruiting at Goldman. But this, the one I have, it really illustrates exactly why foundation matters more than tooling. Is that we had a team that thought they could automate their sourcing to find top talent faster using AI. And they did what seemed really logical, right? They trained the AI agent on the profiles of their current top performers and basically told the AI, go out and find more people like this. The failure wasn't the AI. The AI did that very much like Jolene said, right? It's often wrong, but never in doubt. The AI did exactly what it was told. But the foundation itself was flawed because the historical data was not diverse, right? When they pulled all of the, top performers, high performers, and like, hey, here's all of our people, the AI simply went and scaled the existing bias in that system. And they didn't find the best talent. They found the most familiar talent, apples to apples, and it created an echo chamber of the past rather than the bridge that the team had been wanting to find really talented, diverse, talent. They weren't able to do that because they traded on the old data that wasn't diverse. So it found all those flaws and just repeated that, right? And so that's the reinvention is the solution of the teams that really didn't just apply it. They had to step back. So we created this environment in the Flip Lab for them to try. It's the trial and error, kind of like Jolene was saying. You try this workflow and you find out like, oh, it's not giving us what we want. Now let's go back and figure out where did it go wrong? Where does the human in the loop need to go now? Because you can't just let this autonomous agent go do all of these things. You've got to stop it and check. So where are the checks and balances? And that's where we say the human in the loop. You have to reinvent the process to understand where does the human go. And so now instead of doing, we used to do 80% of the work, and 20% of finessing. Now what we do is we say the AI can do 80% of the work, but the human needs to be in the first 10% of putting those guardrails, making sure that the data is correct and removing the bias and all of these things that could go wrong. Let the AI work that, 80%. And then the next 10% at the end is where the human is checking and making sure that something didn't go wrong. And so it's really the lesson here is that you can't just automate the old step of, basically go sort these resumes or go find all these resumes. You have to reinvent that step and really look at where the human potential and the discernment goes in. And so that's the shift from this labor mindset of just doing all this work to really orchestrating what you want the AI to do. And so it's really training the AI in the right way. It's going to get it wrong. And just like you would with any intern, you course correct and you tell it, no, 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 I want this, and so it's really making sure the human in the loop is making the right judgment calls.
Great, thanks for that, Monica. I think it's time for our second poll question. So I will launch that. Okay, so poll question number 2. Where do you see the greatest opportunity for AI to improve the finance function in the next 12 months? A couple more seconds. All right, this is pretty good. All right, let me end the poll there and share the results. So it looks like we have a tie between automating AP and AR workflows and enhancing real-time reporting and dashboards. And this is aligned with what we're seeing out in the market. Again, just to close out this section here, the question is the foundation ready for you to take advantage of those? And I think that's what folks are grappling with at this point. And this is why, understanding and assessing your data structure or not having the right data structure could limit your ROI on your AI initiative. And that's what we're seeing when we're asked to perform these AI readiness assessments and diagnostics. You shared, Monica, you get asked to do the same. I think it's for those who understand that foundationally there's some things that need to be assessed, that they're really going to take advantage of all that AI could bring the company. I'd like to switch a little bit and move to talking about board, executive, and investor expectations, because we know at the most senior and strategic levels, there isn't almost virtually no board of a major company that is not thinking about AI and how that's going to transform their business. Folks are often calling themselves technology firms. All of a sudden, everyone's a technology firm. So there's a lot to think about, and that speaks to how boards, executives, and investors are thinking about this thing. So question for both of you. Boards and investors are asking tougher questions about AI spend. So what should leaders be prepared to show them about this? Jolene, I'll start with you.
Sure. So board and investors, they want proof, not promises. So leaders should be ready to show concrete workflow wins with the before and after matrix, and also be prepared to demonstrate what happens to the time AI gives back and where the capacity is being redeployed. They also need to show strong governance. So what data is allowed, where humans still sign off, and how outputs are logged and auditable. And finally, they should demonstrate it's not just a pile of pilots and activity. There is a repeatable playbook and pipeline to scale the results across the next set of workflows and the future.
Monica?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And spoken like a true finance person, Jolene said they want to see the receipts, right? So they want to see the receipts. And I agree, you have to have the receipts. But we also, when we're preparing for a board meeting or helping a leader prepare for one, we try to move away from the total hours saved because they can get caught up in that metric, right? But the hours saved only matters if those hours were converted into higher impact work, right? I like to use the analogy of a Michelin star kitchen, right? If you buy a high-end food processor that saves your executive chef 4 hours of chopping vegetables every day, but then that chef just goes to the break room for 4 hours, you haven't improved the restaurant. You've just bought a really expensive appliance. And so the true impact is when that chef uses those 4 hours that they reclaimed to develop a new menu or source better ingredients or mentor the staff. You haven't replaced the chef. You've moved them from labor in the loop, the chopping, to judgment in the loop or creating value. And that's really where you also want to take that story of helping the board members understand how that has basically come back and paid itself in dividends, right? Of, have they expanded market share or been able to, start doing some of the wish list things of, gaining more clients because they have more time to focus on those things. And so that is really the difference between a company who's just using AI and a company that's reinventing themselves for AI and putting it in higher value work.
All right, thanks for that. I'm gonna move based on some of the things that I'm hearing to a particular section on culture, adoption, and let's call it the human side.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to know is what cultural signals tell you an organization is ready for AI, and what signals tell you that it is not? And this time I'll have you continue, Monica.
So for me, it's again, people. It's always the people. You can, like the old adage, right? You can bring a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. It's what I call what's happening is this identity bottleneck. The tech works, the AI works, and the process can actually be mapped, right? You can map out processes, you can go back and rework them, but the person is really this filter or the bottleneck. And most employees have spent decades being rewarded for their effort. And their self-worth is tied into those 10 hours they spent on this manual task because that's the muscle that we've been using for the last 3 decades. And so what we have to get people to do is flip their mindset, right? Flip their work and really think about, help them cope with this idea that when the AI takes 10 seconds to do what they used to do in 4 hours, they start to have this like identity crisis or this, existential crisis of like where do I fit into this whole thing? And so if you don't help the person shift their identity from a doer to an orchestrator, they're going to subconsciously sabotage the process and protect their value, right? We are going to protect ourselves and not use the AI. They're going to shun the AI. So the adoption breaks down when we forget that humans are wired to protect the version of themselves that was previously rewarded. So we have to give them permission and really tell them we're no longer going to reward effort equals success. We're going to reward impact equals success. So how can you augment your impact with AI?
Interesting. We're going to now shift to governance, risk, and reality checks.
Mm-hmm.
So for Jolene, I want to ask you, how should CFOs think about accountability when AI is involved in decision making?
The CFO should treat AI the same way that we treat any tool in finance. So AI can inform decisions, but it can't own them. That's still our responsibility. Accountability stays with the business. And the practical way to think about it is in 3 layers. So define what role AI is playing. Is it drafting, summarizing, forecasting, executing? The more it moves from insight to action, the tighter the controls need to be. Secondly, set human in the loop rules based on risk. So low risk, high volume tasks can be more automated, like formatting reports or drafting first pass commentary. And higher risk decisions like revenue recognition judgments, reserves, credit approvals, and need explicit review and approval. So in other words, automation for routine and human sign off for materiality. And then thirdly, make it auditable. So CFOs should insist on basics, clear data sources, version control, approval logs, and documentation of how the outputs were produced and validated. And, if you can't explain it to an auditor or to your own team, you shouldn't rely on it for a decision. So in simple terms, AI you should see as a colleague and not a control. It can speed up analysis and surface patterns, but finance leadership is still responsible for the judgment, governance, and outcomes.
All right, so we've talked about governance and risks and some of the reality checks. We've talked about culture. We've talked about what boards are expecting, executives, investors, and we talked about just overall state of readiness. In poll number 3, I want to ask the audience. So let me launch that. And the third poll is, what is the biggest barrier preventing AI from delivering measurable impact in your organization? Give a few more seconds here. Okay, I will end the poll and share the results. So interesting here, lack of internal expertise. And I think that that's no surprise. We've talked about how much work we're doing in terms of AI readiness and firms bringing in a third party, a partner, skilled in AI, skilled from the perspective of assessing AI readiness, and that has served them well. So that makes sense. Interesting thing to me is poor and inconsistent data was, along with cultural resistance, were dead last. And we've talked about how important that is at organizations. So it's pretty interesting that those two were the least selected options for the poll. So very telling. Again, I will say that AI doesn't think. It predicts based on patterns of data, which is why we transform that. Again, why in finance, in quantum, we transform data, or we, in our finance transformation efforts, talk about data readiness, because that really helps organizations understand the foundational element that AI would then tap into. And they need to make sure that the data is clean, that it's connected, what the data pipes are. That will help them on their AI journey. I want to move to lessons learned and real talk. So we'll kind of move to trying to sum this up here. So Monica, for you, what's one AI investment you've seen that didn't work and would undo? And what was the lesson?
One of those is I've seen firms spend millions on this massive kind of enterprise data lakes where we talking about like their data needs to be, like cleaned up and before they even knew what problem they were solving. And so it was kind of this, infrastructure first mistake where they start to really try to get everything in order before they, it's kind of one of those things of analysis paralysis where you research, you want to go buy a new car, but you research so much on all the different cars that you don't, it takes you forever to go buy your car. They assumed that if they built the data, the impact would come, and it didn't. And the lesson is that impact drives that infrastructure. So at FlipWork, we like to start with what we call the Flip Lab. And we find, help them understand what is the outcome that they want. What is either the friction they're wanting to remove, or what is the kind of ROI they're hoping to see, so that they really understanding what is killing the team's capacity or the organization's capacity, and then solve that with the resourcefulness of using different tools and testing and learning what those are. You don't want to go buy the library before you know which book you even want to read. So it's one of those things where they'll go buy all of these, one big tool, and it's like it's not one size fits all. So you have to understand what you're trying to solve before you try to go buy the remedy for it. And so those are the big kind of mistakes that are happening, is that they're going and spending and either doing the analysis paralysis and not buying the tool, or just diving in and buying this one size fits all kind of like, I'm going to plug this tool in and it's going to work for everybody across my organization.
Thanks, Monica. Let's turn it a little bit more on a more positive side. So Jolene, what surprised you the most once AI actually went live inside of a finance team?
The pleasant surprise was to see the talent story flipped from fear to pride when it was positioned correctly. So, once teams saw that AI was taking the blank page and the busy work, the junior analysts ramped faster and senior folks spent more time coaching and reviewing. And additionally, the surprise wasn't that AI made people faster, it's that it made finance feel more like a decision function and less like a reporting factory, but only when leaders were intentional about when they embedded it and what work they removed. So, and we really also saw confidence building in our teams just once they started using AI.
I agree. That's been a great result. I want to take us to, because I'm watching time, I want to take us to kind of closing statements. And so this will be for both, for actually, let's all kind of participate in this one. So if attendees remember one thing from today's conversation, what would it be? Jolene.
So I would say, progress is not about having the advanced models and starting from a very high level. Just look at it in very simple terms. Pick that one workflow, measure it, figure out what it is that you would like the end product to be, standardize, and move on to the next. Because as we mentioned earlier, that's really what builds the momentum. Just get started with something simple.
Great. Monica?
Agree. One, it's just get started, but if you have to remember one thing, it's that you can't lead an AI powered team with the old playbook, right? With the old industrial age equation of effort equals success. And so I would challenge you all that tomorrow morning, perform a friction audit. Ask your team, what tasks make them feel like a machine. And then the hard part is give them explicit permission to just stop the grind, right? Tell them, I don't care how many hours this used to take. I care about the impact you create and with the time that you saved, right? So you have to help them break this effort trap, that identity of effort equals success, so that you can actually unlock their zone of genius in every single employee. And stop being a manager of tasks and start being this curator of talent, where they start to really leverage their zone of genius. And that's the only way to kind of bridge this divide that we're seeing in order to see real results, where you're going to start seeing people do the work that they loved, right? I mean, I think most people complain about the drudge work because they don't have time to do the things that they love. AI will allow them to do the things that they love, but you have to give them permission to let the AI do the drudge work.
And I guess from my perspective, I would say this is probably the single most important initiative going on for most companies today. And what organizations need to understand is they need to know what they don't know.
Mhm.
And oftentimes, and it's a worthy investment to have someone or someone come in and help you really assess your structure, your data, your culture, all the things that are going to be critical foundationally to your AI initiatives. There's a lot of spend going on out there, and people are learning things, and you want to get it right. So I think it's a good thing to bring in some external help. The folks that we have internally, it's not like they don't already have a day job. So if you're going to get serious about the initiative, you need to embed um, and get some help inside the organization to really help you chart the path forward and understand what your blind spots may or may not be to ensure you get the greatest likelihood of success. We do have a number of questions in the Q&A section. So let me just go on a few of those and read those. Okay. What tips do you have for encouraging employees to use AI to simplify their work processes? Won't they be reluctant to use AI for fear of eliminating their jobs? And how does management gain employee trust? Great question. Anyone like to take that? Monica, you talk about culture.
Yeah. That's a really great question. And part of it is this, idea that you have to create the psychological safety of, allowing them to fail using AI and telling them that like, we're not going to get it right the first time and really start, just start applying it and start using it. So getting them to pick that one workflow or asking them, where are you getting drained the most? And how might AI alleviate that, of you? And the reality is that, some people are being resistant because it's like, I saw some other questions of like, how is this not going to stop job loss? We have to be honest. There is going to be not necessarily job loss. The jobs aren't getting eliminated. They're morphing into something else. It's almost kind of like you as an infant. If you go back and look at your baby pictures and you look at your today pictures, you evolved into something else, but you're still that same person, right? Your job is going to evolve into something else, but it's still that same job. It's, your zone of genius is just going to get used differently. So yes, the job market is going to look different. The roles are going to look different. So it may morph into something that you don't recognize anymore. So that's going to give you this perception of the jobs are gone. Be honest with your people and saying, listen, the AI isn't going to replace you, but someone in your role who leverages the AI in the right way is going to replace you if you don't do it, right? So really building that trust with them and letting them know that you're going to fail, right? The very first time you apply AI, you're going to realize that, oops, it's amplifying the risk or it's amplifying the errors we had been making in the past. How do we go back and like push reset and do it again?
Thank you, Monica. Joey, here's another one. Should AI come after data infrastructure is mature, or can it help accelerate data maturity?
So I would refer back to my example of the AP invoices, where the data was not mature, and reminding everyone that AI doesn't fix a broken process, so it will scale it. So I think that it's important to have maturity in your data infrastructure, but you could also probably have AI help you to get to that point. Just use it differently.
Great, thanks. Another question here is, can you talk a little about which tools are best for what? From my perspective, there are so many tools out there, and what is happening is many tools and applications are embedding AI within their platforms to help them in the context of what their tool already does. And that's great. But I think what you have to do is you really have to broaden your scope and say, with the responsibilities that we have, and you really have to think about what your role is and what you need to do from your immediate responsibilities. And sometimes um, just on the outer layer of your responsibility and find tools that work. For me, I leverage tons of tools. I also take my own time to learn the tools, understand what these tools are doing, what is the same, what is different, which one has better visuals, which one seems to work faster. I think it is for all of us to really touch different tools and not only do what our jobs might mandate us to do, but we also have to be responsible for our own AI evolution and how we learn to use these tools, because I'm not waiting for my organization to tell me these are the 5 things you can use. I'm going to look a lot broader and understand how to change the work that we do. And along the way, I can teach a lot of my colleagues what works best. So I think you have to do a bit of a research and a bit of research. It's still new, it's still changing very, very quickly. So you need to really explore many, many tools that are out there. I don't know if you have anything to add there, Monica or Jolene.
Yeah, no, Hector, you're absolutely right. And the one thing I'd like to reinforce is that it's not one size fits all, right? If you treat AI like just one single box you plug in for every department, you're going to hit a wall. And so you really have to look at what's the job to be done, and then look at it through three different lenses, right? For these high compliance teams like finance and legal, you are not just looking for creativity, you're looking for precision and reasoning. And so for those teams, you may look at, have them really leverage models like Claude, Sonnet or GPT-4, 4.0. For high volume teams like marketing and sales, you're looking for ideation and personalization. So a tool like Gemini might be better for them. And then for builders or engineers or for like big data, then you might want to be using things like Copilot or Cursor. So that's why we say it's not one size fits all. You have to understand and ask your people, what is it that they need? And like Hector said, they already may be using some tools where AI is going to get infused to it, but it's not one size fits all. So you have to do your research and you have to kick the tires on a few different tools and figure out which ones are going to work for you.
Great. One more question I want to put in there. The question is, what are your recommendations for those further ahead and already integrated data science into FP&A through machine learning, structured data, through Snowflake, et cetera? And how can now AI be used for those that are more structured on the learning curve? Do any of you want to tackle that, or I will? What I would say, yeah, well, from my perspective, there is no end with AI as it relates
Yeah.
to all the possibilities that are out there. If you've put data science in there, you've got your data lakes, your data is structured. It's now understanding what that AI wraps around and starting to see the different patterns, different anomalies. You can ask it tons of questions about your business, about your workflows, about your teams. It's integrating data from all these various sources, bringing down the silos, and really asking it the type of questions that you would normally not have asked because you were limited by those silos, and really expanding what your organization can do. I don't know the context of your organization, your business, or anything, but you can talk about the business model. You can talk about so many different things. When the data is there, it's limited solely by the creativity of your the creativity of your brain and what you're going to ask it. So I think it's limitless. Monica?
I agree. I think in the ideas it is limitless. And so part, we're getting in our own way of limiting, like, we have this limited frame of reference of how we can use AI. You have to start playing with it and saying, what if? And if you ask this question and it gives you all of these ideas. And so, the one thing I would challenge you to do is like, don't marry one model, right? Marry the process, like try to understand your process and then ask the different models how they would handle your process, and you would be shocked on how they might approach it very differently. So I use a tool called Chat Hub, and what it does is that you can pick any 4 models or multiple different models. You can ask the same prompt and you get all 4 answers from the different models at the same time. And you can see where some of them are the same, but where some are different. And then some that are, you're totally hallucinating. But at the end of the day, you start to really, it starts to broaden your mind and you start thinking of solutions that you never would have thought for. So challenge yourself in really diversifying those different tools, but asking those questions that you aren't used to having the time to ask.
Thanks, Monica. I want to thank Monica Marquez for joining us here. Monica Marquez from FlipWork AI, Jolene Bredenkamp from Quantum FBI, and to all the participants who joined us here today. This is a very exciting and timely topic, and we're thrilled to have had the opportunity to share some of these thoughts with you.